Well, this is a treat. Hello, Eddy Temple-Morris.
Hello, Steve Denyer. This is a treat. You know, it's really it's very weird being on this side of the studio,
Because this is our studio that we use in the week, isn't it?
Yeah,
Every day.
yeah.
Thank you so much for doing this. We love you here, and you're such an inspiration and such a brilliant broadcaster.
You're too kind, Steve. You're too kind. You've really found your own voice, as we've talked about in the past, and you're doing great work, and I'm really proud and happy to be following the likes of Jim White and Simon Jordan. Actually, how brilliant!
Now, I know that you're a man with a million stories, and I've been told by your producer, he's got some good stories. So we're going to start off. First question I always ask people: how difficult was it coming up with just a list of 10 tracks from this period of time?
Well, imagine me. People say that I know a lot about music and I'm a music expert and all that stuff. I've been in bands since the 70s. I was in a band at school, but I joined a band that was signed to RCA when I was 19 years old. I've been a musician, and that was in the 80s. So I've been either making or accumulating, and more recently, I say recently, the last sort of 30 years of my life, talking about and writing about music. So yeah, coming up with a list of 100 would be hard for me. So I just try to be editorially ruthless and do the best stories, maybe not the best songs, maybe, but the best stories around them, maybe.
But that's why I'm excited to do this week with you. I know you're on Virgin Radio 80s Plus, and you're on after me at 6 o'clock. So let's go straight into your list. Really dying to ask you about Japan. I love them. They're very special. Why? Tell me about the band and this song.
Well, I had to include Japan in this list because they were... Well, let me ask you something. Who was the first band that you absolutely fell in love with, to the exclusion of all others? I'm talking about a band who you would drop everything and just follow around the world as an Uber fan. What was that band?
Band-wise, probably...
Or artist?
Well, Madonna is the artist.
There you go.
Who I absolutely fell in love with, and wanted to go to every show and worship like a religion.
There you go. Like a religion. That's it. When you are that into a band, it is a religion. And so, they are what Madonna is to you, to me.
Wow.
And I absolutely worship them. I copied them. I bought David Sylvian's, not the actual one. I bought a red leather blazer, the one that he wore on the cover of Quiet Life. I started playing bass because I was so inspired by Mick Karn, their bass player. I had kind of identified that the bass players seemed to be the coolest guys in the band, and all my mates wanted to be, all of my musician mates wanted to be guitar players at that time. And I just thought, it'd be easy to get in a band if I'm a bass player. So I started playing the bass, in about 79. And Japan were just kind of switching from a kind of glam rock band into this beautiful new romantic space. And that new romanticism, I just bought into that. I was a little bit too young for punk to be right in the front and center of the mosh pit of punk in 76. But I was right there for, new romantics.
So you caught the transition, did you? Their transitional phase?
Yeah. Post-punk and, new romantic and goth was where my head was at. And when I was like, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, that was the space that I was in. And Japan, like I say, first band I completely fell in love with, and I kind of nicked my mum's car and illegally, I say illegally, not like against the school policy, I left a boarding school in the middle of the night with my two mates in my mum's car to go to Manchester from Malvern to go and see Japan play at Manchester Apollo.
That's love.
And I still remember the feeling of awe. You say a religion, and it was like I'd been, how people have a rapture in a church, and they get taken over, but it's like in speaking in tongues. It was that. I was absolutely gobsmacked before, during, and after. It was amazing.
Are you enjoying this? You look like you're having great fun.
Oh, mate, talking about music and, you know, like chatting about old times and stories around it. It's just what I was born to do.
And it's special chatting to somebody who knows a lot of the artists that you've picked. You've got personal stories because you've been there, you've hung out with them. I'm dying to ask you all about the specials and Terry and everything else and this song. So I'm just going to let you speak, Eddie.
Well, Steve, I can't top the story that you would have had from good old Simon Jordan about the specials because he persuaded them to reform. My story of the specials is more to do with being a fan. And I was just awestruck by post-punk, this band who had a punk sensibility, but yet who had black boys and white boys in the same band. And we take that for granted now. But in those days, music was incredibly tribal. Mm-hmm. And, you know, as I was growing up, like a middle-class white kid, I had the music that was prescribed for me, really. And then similarly, a black neighbor kid that's the same age as me would have had a prescription from that culture, and never the twain shall really meet. But then along come the specials, and of course then UB40. But the specials absolutely blew me away because they had this kind of punk ethos about them, and yet they had this kind of reggae and ska thing going on. And I wasn't really aware of Jamaican pop music and the difference between reggae and rocksteady and ska and all these great things which I know and love now. But they kind of opened a door for me and shone a light on this incredible island of Jamaica and really introduced me to a genre of music, of Jamaican pop music, which I really, really love. And I've chosen Blank Expression because, well, everybody chooses Ghost Town.
Yes.
And, you know, obviously, like, it's such an iconic track. But I just love the looseness of it, the sound of it. You can hear the room. You know, when you record a band playing, sometimes you want to just hear the raw room and the people playing the instruments. It's sort of almost the opposite of Steely Dan, who I'll play later, which is all very high fidelity. This is kind of lo-fi and gritty and fantastic. Like, it doesn't get any better than this.
This is going to be quite embarrassing. Eddy Temple-Morris, my guest on my 80s playlist, but I haven't mentioned to you this before, but sixth form college, we had a TV, and I used to watch you on MTV at my lunch breaks, and it would have been, I guess I'm going to go with early 90s.
Yeah, it was.
You did this really great interview show.
It was late 90s, actually.
Was it?
It was, yeah, it was. So
I feel younger.
So it was actually 1998,
really?
That show. Yeah, wow. yeah. It's funny how you remember it. Like in the early 90s, it would have been Ray. What's his name? Ray.
I can picture the guy.
And Paul King.
Paul King, of course.
From King. You know, we had similar trajectories in bands and then on TV. But I was railroaded into doing that. I was a producer.
Really?
I was a radio producer.
With no kind of screen experience?
No screen experience at all, and actually no desire to be a presenter. No, I was really happy making jingles at the, you know, what was then the biggest radio station in the country.
Because you did the Radio 1 sound, didn't you?
Yeah, I used to make the jingles for Radio 1.
Amazing.
And I loved that. I had my studio, I had a 16-channel desk, I had Pro Tools, I had all these, like, I basically had my own studio. I was like a kid in a candy shop, making little bits of music to go in between records, you know. And I loved that. And I had absolutely no desire to cross over to be a presenter, but I got kind of spotted by someone and then railroaded into doing a screen test. And I tried to sandbag it. You know, I didn't prepare anything.
Right.
So when they pointed a camera at me and said, say something, I was like, well, what do you want me to say? and they said, well, people normally prepare stuff. And I said, well, you know, sue me. I haven't got anything. You know, there was just pretend to play a video. So I pretended to play an Oasis video because Oasis were massive at the time. Or just becoming massive at the time. And I ranted about Oasis and then they said, do another one. So I ranted about Blur because, you know, flip side of the same coin. And then I did something about festival toilets, and they said, "Don't call us, we'll call you." And then 48 hours later, I got a call saying they've gone bananas about your. They've gone. It's gone right up to the top to Brent Hansen, the head of MTV, and they've gone absolutely bananas about your screen test. I think what did it for me was that everybody at that time wanted to be on MTV. You know, I had all of these like models and wannabes and people who wanted to be famous, and they were just all desperate to get on MTV, and I was there just going, well, actually I don't want to be on MTV. And I think you can smell desperation, can't you?
Yeah, you very cool and calm and collected and like, what am I even doing here?
Yeah. I had, you know, I think that gave me a coolness which is actually way beyond any coolness that I actually have. So, you know, I'm thankful for just being in the right place at the right time.
Isn't it amazing how things work out, you know?
Yeah, really bizarre. You know, I got that call saying, please, can you resign? So I went into my boss, the amazing Matthew Bannister, and I said, listen, I've been given this opportunity. MTV want me to be a presenter. And he said, well, professionally, I don't want you to go because you're brilliant at your job. But personally, as your friend, go. And I look forward to, he said the most brilliant thing. He said, I look forward to inviting you back here at a grossly inflated salary.
Love it. How brilliant. Now tell me about the Cult and this song. This song is about sex, isn't it?
She Sells Sanctuary. I'll take your word for that, actually, Steve, because I was really into the Cult from when they were the Southern Death Cult. So they were this indie band from Bradford when I was at school. So I had a massive crush on this band and on their singer, and on, like, they had this drummer called Aki, who was clearly Pakistani or Indian or something like that. And I was this half Iranian brown kid who was being picked on, who was being had masonry thrown at me in Hereford, like told to F off home, you this, you that. You know, I was my very first day at school, I had a chair thrown at me and was told to F off home, you. I'm not going to say the word, but you know. So seeing, you know, being told by white kids that being brown is like really not the thing to be. I saw this brown kid in this amazingly cool band who were at #1 in the NME indie charts at the time.
Yeah.
Southern Death Cult they were. And I absolutely worshipped them. Again, like, you know, a religion again. And then, so they split up. Ian, their singer, moved to London. That they became the Death Cult and then the Cult. And then the other side, Aki, Buzz and Barry, became this band called Getting the Fear. And I joined them right at the end of their kind of career. So, and then that band became Joy, which I was the bass player for. So basically, Steve, I was in the non-successful side of the Cult family tree. And then,
still counts, though.
And then, yeah, absolutely still counts. And, you know, we got some really good reviews, and we had some really interesting gigs, and, you know, we had some great fans and stuff, and I got the chance to tour the UK for the first time, you know. And then a few years later, we're playing at, what was it? The Hammersmith Palais. And Ian from the Cult comes to see us, and he meets me and he sees his old mates, and I remember him showing us his stomach, which was really big, and just going, well, you know, £1 million publishing deal I've just signed, and like, you know, She Sells Sanctuary was like the tune at the time that had just recently come out and been absolutely massive, and he'd signed this huge deal with Warner Brothers. So I just wanted to kind of pick that song as it just reminded me of that moment of, wow, you know, I'm in a band and we could get that £1 million publishing deal if we play our cards right. And of course, you know, you have these visions of, you know, what things might be, but there it is.
Lovely. Out of everything you've done, and you've pretty much done it all, you know, broadcaster, DJ, remixer, television presenter. I could go on, but, you know, we've only got this week. Do you have a career highlight?
Gosh, a career highlight. I suppose when the Prodigy called me their favourite tour DJ.
Wow.
And Liam asked me to support them at Milton Keynes Bowl. And I got to find out what it looks like going up in front of 60,000 people.
Wow.
So, you know, that my heart was in my mouth. And I was actually doing Secret Garden Party at the time. And it's the only time this is how much it meant, really. It was the only time in 23 years that I left the Secret Garden Party site on that weekend. And I left it because, well, it was them. It was the Prodigy, who I love. And because actually it's only half an hour from Secret Garden Party site, so I could go. And I was in fancy dress, because Secret Garden Party is a fancy dress party. So I was in Victorian fancy dress with this hilarious fake bushy moustache and a crushed top hat. And, you know, like a black waistcoat and stuff.
I'm sure it went down a storm.
Well, I mean, 60,000 people, Steve, like 55,000 of them couldn't see me. They would be too far away. It was only the first 5,000 that could sort of see you. But my God, you know, seeing people to the horizon is quite daunting, but also in terms of the energy that you get, quite invigorating. And that was probably a career highlight for me.
Sounds incredible. Really interesting that you've picked this Smith song, because I love this song. Surprisingly, no one has asked for this yet, and it's my favourite. So, dying to ask you about it.
Well, how soon is now? It's probably been blocked, as I think is the technical expression, by our mutual friend and boss Mike, who absolutely hates this song.
He hates it, yeah. Sorry, Mike. It's Eddy's show, though.
We love you, man. So the reason I've chosen the Smiths is because when I left school, and I had a really tough time at school, and I went to Westfield College, University of London, as a bright-eyed, optimistic teenager, still 18, and the what's it called? And when I got there, of course, we had our freshers' ball, you know, the very first party that you have as a newly installed student, full of the joys of life and, you know, so bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And it was the Smiths. But, of course, nobody really heard of them. Well, they were on the Hand in Glove tour, as it was. They had just that week got onto the cover of the NME for the first time. So they were like the hottest ticket in town. The
emerging hot people, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So this is 1983. So This Charming Man hadn't come out yet. And How Soon Is Now hadn't come out yet. But I'll tell you why I want to choose it in a sec. So it was all about Hand in Glove, This Charming Man, Reel Around the Fountain. It was that first Smiths album time. I don't think the album had even come out at this stage. They were on tour to promote the fact that it was about to drop. So I'm in this student hall, and I'm being pointed at, look, that's Billy Bragg over there, and that's Ben Watt and Tracy Thorn from Everything But the Girl. Amazing. In their tweed duffel coats, like looking so cool. And, you know, there's all these guys from outside the university, like some pretty rough looking kind of suede heads, you know. And the roadie comes on and starts throwing gladioli out to the crowd. It was like a thing for Morrissey at that time. Gladioli. I'd heard these stories about this band, and they come and they're surrounded by flowers, and there's flowers flying everywhere. You know, it was like a gladioli was the thing. So the roadie chucks out boxes of gladioli around the crowd so we could sort of throw them around. And then the opening incredible jangly guitar sound of, I think it was This Charming Man, starts. And our hearts jump into our mouths, and then on come the Smiths, and on comes Morrissey with gladioli in every orifice, like in every pocket. He had gladioli, and he was, you know, he had that kind of paisley-ish shirt, flimsy shirt that he used to wear, unbuttoned down to the waist, and he was like this gorgeous vision, and he was just swinging these gladioli around and around and around, and kind of like sashaying his hips. It was a vision which I will never forget. And the crowd went absolutely ballistic. And of course, with no health and safety procedures to speak of in those days, the place was murderously overfull. And so people were treading on each other. The mosh pit, which I found myself in the middle of. Oh, wow. I was absolutely taken over by the moment, Steve. You can imagine it. And there was this moment where me and this quite rough-looking tattooed suede head collided in the mosh pit. And there was just this moment where he looks at me, this snotty-nosed public school kid, and I look at him, this tattooed suede head who clearly is not interested in education in any way. And it was either going to be murder or something else. And he just smiled and I smiled and then we hugged each other. Like, it was just the greatest hug I've ever had in my life, because I thought I was going to get murdered at that point.
Could have gone the other way.
It absolutely could have gone the other way. But it was like, that was the symptom of how the Smiths made us feel at that time. And I saw them 3 times in the next few years, and they got progressively worse and worse. But from that moment, I was absolutely in love with them, and I bought everything that they did from that moment. And I remember buying William, It Was Really Nothing, on a 12-inch, putting it on my little BSR turntable in my little room in that house with all those other musicians, skint musicians. And I put on the A-side, and I was like, nah, you know, it's all right. It was the first time I heard a Smith song, and I thought, oh, actually, it's not actually that good. But then, as you always do, flip it over, put it on the B-side. And then this jiggy, 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 just says, oh my God, this is delayed guitar sound. What is that? It's really special. And then this like wailing note, bended note comes in, and I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. But it was a B-side, Steve. It was like, and I was like, why the hell did they put this on the B-side? It's so much better than the A. And of course, I was not the only one who thought that, because then, I don't know, months or years later, it came out as an A-side.
Yeah.
But that's how it started life. It was like, and the lesson there is always listen to the B-side.
Always check the B.
Always check the flip. And it's not, you know, it's not literal, it's metaphorical, like it's with life. You know, always don't just look at the breakfast show, look at the guy who's doing the early show.
Sure.
You know, like it's look at the flip side in life and you'll find these gems.
Eyes wide open. Yeah.
There you go.
Excellent stuff. Let's jump straight into the next track. All of these tracks are so good. You know, occasionally you get one on the list that's a bit of a filler or whatever, but they all deserve to be listened to and devoured. We're going to go into Julian Cope.
Julian Cope is one of the most underrated people in pop music ever.
Why is that?
He came from this incredible scene. You know, sometimes you have a place in the UK that has its finger on the zeitgeist, and post-punk, it was Liverpool. You had the beginnings of, well, you had the Teardrop Explodes.
Yeah.
You had Echo and the Bunnymen. You had the beginnings of the KLF. You had the beginnings of Frankie Goes to Hollywood, the Mighty Wah. I could just go on and on and on.
All from Liverpool.
And yeah, all from Liverpool. And the Lightning Seeds, you know, Ian Broody, you know, it was like an absolute hot pot of talent. And they all used to go to the same clubs and all hang out with each other. And the kind of pivotal guy, I think, in this whole kind of melange of incredible talent was Julian Cope. And the Teardrop Explodes were so ahead of the curve and so like influential in a way that I don't think people fully understand and appreciate. So I wanted to big up Julian Cope, but I wanted to go beyond just playing Reward by Teardrop Explodes, which we all, you know, I was sitting in the chair that you're sitting in now, and I had Paul Weller sitting where I am now. And I said to him, in Julian's amazing book, Julian Cope's incredible biography, Head On, he talks about you when you were in the Jam, like adopting his kind of horn sound from Reward, because you were in the studio at the same time. You know, was that him just, you know, sucking his own? I mean, was there any truth to that? And bless him, Paul Weller, the absolute legend. Paul Weller goes, yeah, absolutely. Like, I was totally blown away by the Teardrop Explodes, and I was so influenced by things that were going on, and they were amazing. You know, that kind of sound that they had was really unlike anybody else. You'd look at Dexy's Midnight Runners to have that kind of horn soul like sound in an indie band context, and they were out on their own doing their own thing. This wasn't soul music. It was like indie music before indie music was even a thing, the Teardrop Explodes. So after The Teardrop Explodes, there was Julian Cope's Saint Julian album. And it kind of took that envelope-pushing test pilot thing which he had and sonically took it to the next level. It's punchier and it's ballsier and it's more high octane. And I loved, like, he looked like how I looked. He had leather trousers and a leather biker jacket on the cover. And that's what I used to wear every day, because I used to ride a motorbike every day. And that's how I looked. I just thought, oh man, you know, I love this guy. Like, he looks like, like we've got the same clothes, and I love his music. I love the production of it. It is so vivacious and so present. And I think that it influenced lots of people in the way that they were going to sound, that music was going to sound later. Because, you know, this was still in the 80s and he was telegraphing what a lot of bands were going to sound like in the 90s.
Incredible. Eddie, as we go into Tears for Fears, who I absolutely love, and I know you love them, I just want to quickly ask you, and I don't want to bring the mood down, but I just want to ask you and talk about, you've always been so frank about your mental health, and you've done so much good via charity. We've spoken about the Black Dog and everything else that you do. Do you realise, you know, what a mark and how much you've helped people by chatting about it? I check the texts that come through in your show, and occasionally someone sends a text going, thank you for being honest. I've never heard anybody talk like that. It's
lovely of you to say that, Steve. And, you know, your question is, do I know? And I wouldn't know if it was telly, but because this is radio and it's so, you know, I'm in your front room, in your speaker, it's very personal. And I know, because I've had several times over the last 5 years that I've been in this lovely, lovely place. People say to me, for example, when my dear friend Keith Flint killed himself, Keith of The Prodigy, I was in pieces. I was on the floor in this studio, unable to do my show, and Kate Lawler had to finish it for me. And the next day I went on the radio and I talked about my vulnerability, and I talked about how suicide is I talked about how suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem, and that we all get through these things, and we get through them stronger and wiser and certainly more interesting and with a story to tell. And this man texted in and said, Eddie, I was about to kill myself and now I'm going to seek help just because of what you said. And it was the greatest moment of my radio career, because I just lost Keith. And I just thought, well, like a busy nightclub, one in, one out. Keith's gone out, but we've had one come in directly because of Keith. You know, it only took 24 hours for Keith to save a life. You know, I always say to people who are suffering from grief, it only takes a matter of time. It might be minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, or years for you to have something amazingly positive happen as a direct result of that person dying. And with Keith, it only took 24 hours. It was amazing. Incredible stuff.
When we've spoken about the fact that Tears for Fears was such a pivotal band, weren't they, to deal with matters like mental health?
Well, it's really profound that you've brought up the conversation on mental health before Tears for Fears, because Tears for Fears' very name is a whole mental health metaphor. And their music, I remember, was the first time that I ever really became aware of mental health as a thing. And I remember hearing John Peel, bless him, play Pale Shelter on his show. Song. Yeah, and I just thought, oh my God. And of course their first album was called The Hurting, you know, and it was, they really, like Shout is about primal scream therapy. You know, there are so many mental health motifs and subjects in their songwriting. And Tears for Fears just became instantly a band that really reached into the depths of my soul. And my funny story is that I ended up working with Jeremy Green, who was the producer of Mother's Talk, which is on one of my favourite albums ever made, Songs from the Big Chair. And I was a bass player that he used on a few projects. And he called me up and he said, I've got this new project and I want you to play bass on it. And, you know, I've got a decent budget and blah, blah, blah. Will you meet me at the Slug and Letters in Islington to do some pre-production? And I said, yeah. But pre-production for him, being a raging alcoholic, was just basically him getting really, really drunk in the daytime before he went home. And he ended up ordering, this is after a whole day of drinking, he ended up ordering a tiger's tail. And I said, and I remember that the barman was like, what's a tiger's tail? He said, it's a pint glass with a double shot of everything off the optics and then a dash of orange juice. and he please drink responsibly. So he orders this. We start drinking it. And I'm feeling really sick at this point. And then he starts doing what alcoholics do, which is, you know, become incredibly abusive and lay into me and be absolutely vile. And then I remember, like in slow motion, and he's a big man, 6'5" and the rest. And probably as wide as he was tall. This fist go 360 degrees like a ham all the way around and then connect with my chin. Of course, I was so drunk that I didn't get out of the way. And my cat-like reflexes, Steve, were not working. And I got knocked off my chair. And at that point, but the thing is, I had the presence of mind to know what was going on, which is that this is not personal, this is an alcoholic. And they were about to call the police, and I stopped them from calling the police, and I paid the bill and the tab and got him out of there, and then he started jumping up and down on cars and setting off their alarms, and it was a horrible moment. And then the next day he called me up as if nothing had happened, just going,
how are you?
So hey man, you know, so should we, you know, do you want to come and do this session? Like, and I was like, Jeremy, I would be really happy if I died never hearing from you again. And I'm delighted to say I have never heard from him again. But there it is. My chance to further work with Tears for Fears producer was dashed.
I bet the Weatherspoons had never seen anything like it midweek.
The Slug and Letters. Oh my God, yeah. It was definitely the most, the most argy-bargy that happened in there that year, I think. But but I wanted to play a Tears for Fears song which plays into existentially Virgin Radio 80s plus, and I wanted to go into the plus because you and me love our 80s music.
Yeah, we do.
But also I love the fact that we do go in a little bit late 70s and we do go a little bit early 90s. And so I've got a chance now, and you've been very kind enough to say, like, you can go off piste, Eddie, and play, you know, a few tracks that we don't play on Virgin Radio 80s plus. So I've chosen Break It Down Again. It is from an interesting period in Tears for Fears' career because it's when they fell out. Kurt and Roland fell out.
Hadn't Kurt left at this stage?
Kurt left. And testament to what a fantastic bass player he is that Roland is now on his own. Roland had the best voice for me, but he lost a great bass player. And of course, he's in Tears for Fears, who were one of the biggest bands in the world at this time. So he could basically cherry pick whoever he wanted, really, pretty much. Unless somebody was really established. I'm talking about session musicians. And who he picked was Gail Ann Dorsey, who was David Bowie's bass player. Girl bass player, you know, amazing, really talented, beautiful. And, you know, that's testament to the talent of Kurt as a bass player, that it took David Bowie's bass player to replace him. And I just love this song. And in the times that I've seen Tears for Fears more recently, I think it's this song that I look forward to the most. I don't know why. There's a real optimism about it.
It gives me swagger, this song. And the amount of times I listen to it on the street and I come alive.
Yeah, this is a great song to have in your earphones when you're walking down the street. It'll definitely give you more of a spring to your step. It's a wonderful, wonderful song. Beautifully produced, fantastically written and sung by Roland.
Eddie, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you. We love you. I love you. It's been a pleasure hanging out with you.
Love you too, man. Thank you. I want people to hear the high five that's happening right here.
Wonderful.
Cheers, Steve.
Thank you, Eddie.
Thank you so much for having me.